everybody to Art Without Apology. We're excited to have you join us for this webinar this evening during Pride Month. And I'm going to start off by introducing our moderator, Jason Montgomery. Jason is the co-director of Attack Bear Press, based in East Hampton, as well as 50 Arrow Gallery. And he's also been very gracious to take on the job of organizing and really leading this webinar series and selecting different webinar topics for Valley Arts Mentors. So Jason's going to talk about a little bit about Valley Arts Mentors and introduce our funders and introduce, most importantly, our panelists. So welcome. Thanks for being here, Jason.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Montgomery. Hauka Ola, hello. I'd like to give a big thank you to PT Theater for coordinating and organizing these webinars. It's been a great joy to work with Jonathan and to work with Scott over at Holyoke Media, who's providing our tonight's technical support. Valley Arts Mentors is a collaboration between Shelburne Falls PT Theater Company, Holyoke Media, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Franklin County. VMA supports artists in the Connecticut River Valley, connecting them with resources to help grow their practice. VMA's webinar series is supported by an organizational recovery grant and a festivals and projects grant from the Mass Cultural Council. The webinar series and mentorship program began with grants from Mass Humanities and the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts Valley Creates program, and with funding from the Barr Foundation. VMA programming is supported in part by grants from the Chicopee, Conway, Hadley, Holyoke, Ludlow, Northampton, Southampton, Springfield, and West Hampton Cultural Councils, local agencies which are supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. Tonight, we have a very, very special group here with us to talk about amplifying the voices of LGBT creators during Pride Month and really all year round. Our panel includes, and I'm going to butcher your name because I only know you as Naya Gabriel, they, them, who is a queer, trans, non-binary, disabled, multidisciplinary activist and resilience facilitator. Nicole M. Young Martin, who is a performance poet, playwright, and pop culture critic. And Alex Woolner, who is a poet, international educator, co-founder of Attack Bear Press, typewriter and typewriter enthusiast, originally from Worcester County, Massachusetts. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for being here. And I feel like this is the first panel that we've had where I consider everybody family. So welcome. So normally we have a very conversational tone around our webinar series. I invite all of our panelists to jump off of mute and to take this opportunity to really, I'd love to hear from each and every one of you about yourself, your work, and some of your personal journey as an LGBTQ artist and how that's really influenced your, how your identity has influenced your artistic expression.
I'll go first. Yay! And Jason, thank you for acknowledging that we are among family. The four of us are fairly close and have worked on various projects together, both personally and professionally. So for me, the personal journey, I feel like because I have done some form of art since I was like 6, and I've been in community with other artists in different genres, my queerness has always kind of just been there because it just feels like I've always landed in those communities, and it's always been kind of like I don't know Nicole outside of that identity because it's been like I've been out since 16, but I've been in spaces with quirky creatives all of my life. I feel like how my identities, because I have so many identities that are so marginalized, not only being queer, but also I'm a plus size woman, I'm taller, I'm Black, under these braids, I have Afro. So it's like, I have all of these identities that should not be as centered as they are. So I think like how my identity has evolved is, and now I'm like in my effort 40s, that I've become very unapologetic and that I've always been authentic, but now I don't apologize for anything. I'm just like, oh, like people would say, oh, Nicole said something. Okay, she said it. Let's accept it as that. I've become this like older person, get off your lawn, who's like in their 70s or their 80s, very early in my life, where I'm just like, eh. But I also think it's because I've been a part of communities that have always been very unapologetically themselves. And I give credit to my parents, because my parents, they were people, and I think because I was raised as an only child, put me front and center and was just like, she is who she is. So I think I've been lucky in that I've always been this. It's just I now have expanded into the world of, I don't care what you think. It's just going to happen. It's just going to be the way that it is. And if I say something or do something, oh well. I hope that makes sense for folks.
That makes so much sense. And I'd love to hear from the other panelists on the same question.
Do you want to go, Naya? Do you want me to go?
I mean, I saw you on mute, so go ahead.
It was a mistake. No. Hi, everybody. I'm Alex. Yeah, the journey. I mean, I think that I had maybe a somewhat unique experience in my journey as an artist. I think of myself primarily as kind of more of a writer than a visual artist, and someone who tries to facilitate poetry in different spaces where you might not normally expect to find it. And then also sort of like an art space facilitator, and more so than a visual artist. And that comes also from like being able to, I think at like a young age, sort of explore who I was, and a lot of my queerness like permeates through those spaces and through those media. I think I was saying that I was in a unique position because I was able, at least within my like household, to come out at a very early age. I think I was like 9 or so, and I grew up in like a greater time and place that was not at all very accepting of the LGBTQ community. However, my household, also growing up being raised as an only child, actually, but with like this larger found family of queer performers, and like adults in my life who were very open in the spaces that they could be. And I think that sort of from a very, very early age, like I don't remember not knowing gay men and queer women, and people who at the time in the 80s and 90s kind of needed to hold back that part of their personality and that part of their identity, really, not personality, identity, community, from like the outside, and just sort of like find joy in that and in that community together, sort of like behind closed doors. So I think like that experience definitely influenced my writing from like a very early age, and how I operated in art and how I saw artistic expression. Probably that was a long-winded reply. Naya.
It was all, but it was beautiful. Thank you. Interesting. So I am not an only child. I'm the oldest of 5, in fact. So yep. How that influenced, I have no idea, but obviously everything has an impact. And I think my coming out story is, like many folks, a series of stories. You know, it's not a one moment. I definitely remember a time when I was so I was homeschooled for the most part, but there was a brief moment when I was in 5th grade. And I knew for a fact that this, like my best friend at the time, that the relationship we had, I have no idea about her end of things, but my end of things, I was like, this is not, there's something different about it, right? And didn't have the words for it. I didn't even really spend much time thinking about it, but I do remember that sort of concept of, you know, just being aware of a thing that is not, you know, necessarily being portrayed or normalized in certain ways. And so, and I name that partly just to sort of share it, but also to highlight this idea of queerness not simply being just the identity itself, but also kind of like the verb, right? So queering, right? So the idea of, okay, so this is, you tell me, you know, somebody tells me this is the normative activity, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And my alignment, the way was put together by the universe, I guess, is to say, okay, that's my formula for doing something else, right? Like, you know, I just don't, you know, I don't accept that. It doesn't work for me to accept it. I mean, obviously, you know, that's within a context of, you know, care for other humans and what they need, but in general, as for me and how I move through the world, it's just, you know, the way that I am is to see other paths, you know, and to not see them as other paths, they're just paths. And, you know, and so my art, which is increasingly becoming more and more multidisciplinary, though I am definitely a visual artist, I play with color. It is about both showing that, you know, and in different ways, whatever way comes to me and I have access to, but also finding ways both through my art, both through showing my art, and also, you know, also being an art space facilitator. I like that phrase, it's nice. So giving others the opportunity to explore, you know, because part of being this kind of being in the world is exploration and play and, you know, what else is possible. And, you know, the phrase that I love to share with others is, you know, you see these circles behind me, that's my latest sort of like art project, creation. And for me, they're like portals. And, you know, a lot of my chosen family and art enthusiasts or whatever, however you want to put it, often tell me that they see portals in my work. And that's very, like, that makes sense to me because I see portals of possibility in, you know, in various different things. So finding ways to highlight those, you know, what are the ways that we can sort of, you know, connect with possibility. And that includes within the context of challenge. You know, it's not in spite of it, it's because of it, right? So the wounds and the traumas and the cracks in the systems, those are the moments for me, you know, and that is definitely deeply tied to my identity, my various marginalized identities, Nicole, when you were mentioning that, of being able to see those and say, okay, what can we make out of that? What comes out of that? What are the lessons? You know, how can we better care for each other? How can we better see each other? How can we better tell the world who we are? You know, and tell the world how we want to be seen and how we want to be interacted with, So my pronouns, are they, them? Why are they them? Is that the perfect way to dress? No, it's not. It actually isn't. But it is the best way that I have found at this moment with our current sort of language and whatnot to guide other humans to address me in a way that works for hopefully both of us, but certainly for me. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for right now.
And I wanted to chime in with something that Naya said about challenging and questioning. And I feel like queerness is more than just dealing with sexuality. It's also a combination of lifestyle and identity. Like I was always that person who is like, I am the why person. I'm like, okay, why is it like this? Like I remember back in, I think I was maybe like 8 or 9 in Sunday school. And ironically, I grew up very religious, not because I, wanted to follow a certain, idiom or religion, but because I love the pageantry of religion. Of course, theater performer. And I was always that kid, right? And I was always that kid, like in Sunday school, like the women in the Bible were bad. And I was just like, why are all the women in the Bible bad? Why are you asking that question? Why are you challenging? I don't like that things just exist just to exist. I'm like, okay, like why are, like I say, like, why are relationships this way? Why can't, platonic friends be the ones who are the next of kin at a hospital? Why, what? So I'm always that person. I've always been that person who's like, why? And I think questioning, pushing back, and challenging norms is something that is important to the queer identity, because I feel like we are doing something that is within and beyond possibilities. We want to exist in a world where the systems that were set up for us to follow no longer exist, because those systems don't work. They shouldn't work for anybody. So
that is really interesting. And what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing a couple different things. One is about the intersectionality of all of your identities and how that plays into the larger LGBTQ community. But I really like this idea of queerness as questioning. And I'm going to go a little off of our predetermined questions, because I do have a question about how do you feel in somewhere like Western Mass that, and this is a remarkable simplification, don't get me wrong, but is seen broadly as being a queer space. How do you see that kind of position as being both operating in a queer space and in queer systems, but also queerness as questioning and pushing boundaries? And I'd love to hear from anyone.
I want to put this out here before I think of my response, but I'm like, Jason, you're asking us how do we operate within the Twilight Zone? That's what you're asking us right now. How do we all know Western Mass is, excuse my language, a hot ass fucking mess. Like, how do we operate within the Twilight Zone? I need to take a minute to like constructively answer your question. I just want to put that out there.
No, I think that's beautiful. I think that is such a great response.
I also wanted to say, if I'm a little bit like, I don't know, slower to respond today or what have you, for people who don't know, I'm actually in Tokyo, Japan right now, and it's my early morning, so just forgive me. But also that question of like spaces and locations, to, just like sidebar tangent for a second off of something that Naya said before we actually answer your question. So being in spaces where, so I'm like trying to get my my whole head back into like Western Massachusetts mode, because I've been here for a couple weeks now. But I was thinking about how, Naya, you said like queering, exploring identity, and I wrote down a couple of things that I was like, that's great. But so on the subject of pronouns and sort of like having people see you and acknowledge you in the best way that we can in the language that we have, living in a different context. So when I like to joke that I fled the country as early as I could. So when I was right after I graduated from undergrad, I lived abroad, and I lived in a context in a language that at least in like the spoken language, the pronouns were like all gender. There were not gendered pronouns in the community that I lived in when you were speaking to someone. And that completely shifted how I thought of my own gender, expressing gender, if it was even really like necessary in day-to-day life and in communicating with people. And I just wanted to like throw that out there. But anyway, in terms of Western Mass, I think sometimes I forget as in particular, as a white queer person operating in Western Massachusetts, which I think is important to distinguish when we talk about like intersectionality. I think that when I leave Western Mass, I forget just how, sort of like Twilight Zone-y, as you put it, Nicole, or like how, in some ways, there's a lot of freedom of expression and a lot of community, and I'm able to, in many ways, kind of like put my guard down and just be very unapologetically myself. And then when I step into other communities, other cultures, even just traveling to different parts of the country, which I do for work and to see family, it's definitely a wake-up call, even just through going through TSA, that like I am other, or like when I was growing up and exploring my own identity actually started when I was told by my peers, by my friends, by my family that I was different and that I operated differently and not according to the gender norms, like when I was like very young, like elementary school, and kind of getting bullied for that, but also just the like confusion that came from that. And so I'm able to feel much less confusing in Western Massachusetts, I think. But also, I think that, of course, like no area is perfect. And I could go on about the dynamics that I see and the disappointment that I have sometimes in the white queer community in Western Massachusetts, but maybe we can save that for another question. I'll let somebody else answer. But
so I hate to interrupt, but we do have a question from the audience that I do feel like really is important to this moment, and that question is, how are you all so fabulous? Big love from California, from Diana and Gela. So I know everyone knows Diana, so a big shout out to Diana Alvarez. But please, back to the questions at hand.
I'll answer the how are we so fabulous, because Diana and Gela are a part of that, and everyone else here. And then also I'll answer Jason's question. But I know for me, I'm fabulous because my community, like just the chosen family and the community that has been built for me here has been amazing. And this is the first place that I've been able to fully be myself unapologetically. I'm originally from the Midwest, from Detroit, and it was like I always had to be segmented selves. It's like I couldn't be the artist administrator, queer person who happens to be Black, who's first generation until I came here. But at the same time, because my community has done this for me, but at the same time, I feel like the reasons why my community has been built because we needed to support one another. When Jason asked, how is it existing in Western Mass, which for reference, I lived in Western Mass for about 15 years or so. Right before the pandemic, I now live in Northern Connecticut, which ironically, where I live, even though I only live 20 minutes from the Mass border, is so different in many different ways, but I still work in Western Mass.
Yeah.
I think this is the best way to sum up my experience and why the communities have had to happen. I feel like the ways in which I've had to move through Western Mass is similarly to the following 3 video games: Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and Super Mario Brothers. Where it's like I am always on the defense, and every time I get into conversation with someone who doesn't exist within my community, it's always like 3, 4, fight, go to like prove your identity, prove why you exist, prove why you're in the area. And it's like, and I grew up in Detroit, and Detroit is like super Black, but it's like I've become even Blacker, even queerer in this space because I've always had people push back and not only question my identity, but just say in so many passive aggressive ways that I don't belong, not only here, but I don't belong to exist at all. And I feel like a lot of people in this region don't realize how much they other by the behaviors in which they exhibit. Like, for example, always having to like justify why I wear my hair a certain way, justify, why I make particular food choices, justify, why I'm wearing particular things. I'm like, just because it's not your experience and not things that you understand doesn't make it wrong. And it's just so weird to exist and live in this queer space where binaries don't exist for the privilege, for the dominant caste, as a friend and colleague of mine would say, but the binaries exist for people who are not of the privilege. It's just like, nope, you told the line here or you told the line here. Whereas me, because I have privilege and wealth, I can choose where I want to exist and I can choose the life that I create for myself. So I hope that answers your question, but literally it's like every time I feel like I am fighting a game and I'm just like, okay, what game do I have to play now to go outside? Okay, let me put on my Mortal Kombat shield. Okay, let me get my Street Fighter shield. It's just, I'm tired of having to continue to defend my existence and to not even like defend choices. It's like, who I am is who I am. It's just, and people say these are choices, like tattoos and all these things are choices. And I'm like, but if I didn't have these things, I wouldn't be happy. So why should I have to justify an existence because I'm someone that's different? If that makes sense at all.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think we've kind of fallen into that realm of the intersectionality question. Intersectionality, particularly amongst the LGBT community, has become more and more important and more central. However, I personally, and this is me commentating a little bit, I think there's still a long way to go, in the community. But what are your kind of thoughts around intersectionality? And do you address this in your artwork? Do you bring this into your practice? And I'd love to hear from Naya to start us off with.
Just taking a moment to soak it all up. So it's interesting. I knew you were going to say Street Fighter, by the way, Nicole. I could see it. Yeah. So you want to know how does intersectionality show up in my work, or how is it?
How your general thoughts on intersectionality, particularly amongst the LGBT community? That can be the larger macro community or more micro here in Western Mass. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it if it is a part of your practice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we were talking about, so both Nicole and Alex, what they just both shared reminded me of the sort of the concept of code switching, right? Because, the idea that you have to tailor your words, your expression, your way of being, the sorts of things that you share, etc., depending on who you're interacting with, depending on what your goal in that interaction is. Are you trying to get a job? Are you trying to date this person? Are you trying to, what is the goal? And depending on what it is, there really is this unavoidable, as far as I feel, push, need, whatever, to switch. And that's part of being human, of course. Like, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing, but what it becomes problematic when, first of all, when that means that you don't, first of all, when it's this stressful, aspect of your life, that you're always on edge, kind of the way Nicole was talking about it, right? Always sort of like, I don't, quite know what the situation is. And you were talking about intersectionality. Well, let's start throwing in what I like to call, thanks to a student in Hampshire that taught me this different version of the neurodiverse word, which is neurospiciness. Okay, neurospiciness. I love it because I'm spicy. You know what I'm saying? Super spicy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not super spicy, but I got some spice. So anyhow, the point is, if you throw that into the mix, then that makes it even more complicated, right? We're being told that these are the proper ways to interact with other humans. And, some of us are like, but that makes no sense to me. It just doesn't. And I know that I'm supposed to just accept it and somehow apply it so that I don't have a negative interaction with certain humans. But frankly, I just want a manual. I want every human who wants to interact with me to hand me a manual and say this, and I can just reference it, but that's not going to happen apparently. So, so it, and how does this come up for me? I mean, it comes up in terms, well, it certainly comes up when I'm asked to summarize who I am and what my work is and what does it say and all these things, right? Write an art statement, fill out this grant application in 100 characters and, whatever, a paragraph, everything has to be sort of, and not only, it's not even just the size of the text that you're supposed to put it into, it's, again, a different form of code switching, right? There is such a thing as grant speak, and not everybody is fluent in it. I happen to be fluent in it. I mean, I'm not, there's evidence, and I'm sure, and there's people who are even more fluent than I am, but there are so many people who aren't. And and so the way, so being aware of this definitely influences the way that I talk about my art, the way I talk about grants, the way I try and, bring folks into this world of, applying for grants and talking about your artwork. Not as much as I would like to. I again, another element of intersectionality, disability comes into the mix as well. I'm exhausted for reasons that, thank you, COVID, so, these things come into play because that means that, I can't do as much as I want to in terms of building community and connecting and, and the kinds of activities that I feel safe involving myself with are very different than they were before COVID, and that's true for a lot of people. And so that's just as relevant as anything else, it's just as hard to talk about, really. But it does influence, all of these things, they flow in and out of each other. And, I'll say one more thing, which is, and this concept, I know I'm inspired to think of this because of Alok Vaid-Menon. I don't know if, I'm sure some of you may or may not know who they are. In any event, one thing that they often say, well, I'm not going to try and quote because I that's not what I want to do. But when you mention choices, and the, how, I think Nicole, you might have said it, something referencing how folks will say, oh, well, that's a choice that you're making, to dress a certain way, to use those pronouns, to whatever, to have a tattoo, that sort of thing. And I wonder if that impulse to reduce our sort of being to that's just a choice comes from a very personal wound that person has, because they don't feel like they have that choice. They don't feel like they ever had access to the kind of possibilities that we see and that we're navigating through, and so so it manifests itself in these, micro violent ways, and anyway, so I'll just leave it at that for right.
It's really fascinating.
And I think this is a way to tag on to Naya, and then also to answer the question about intersectionality existing in the work. And I want to make sure to leave some space for Alex. I'm going to try to make this short, but this is one of the reasons why I'm now in my recent work, I'm exploring generations and like ageism and that, and like stages of development where it's like, especially children and also roles, like gender roles in life. It's like, especially children and caregivers. Those are two spaces that I've been exploring a lot in my writing. And I think one of the reasons why is because those are two particular age and gender roles where you are supposed to be seen and not heard, yet you're supposed to meet all of these benchmarks and be all of these things. Like I wrote a piece, I did two pieces recently, one on the gendering and the caregiving space that mothers kind of exist in, but in the absence and the suffering of their own identities and their own selves. And then thinking about my piece after Audrey, which kind of developed into this, we're going to look at the stages of development for a child and how they realize their realities. And thinking about those two spaces, it's like, children, okay, if you do not abide by these rules, and especially thinking now with transness and gender non-conforming and all of that, and those spaces for young people where it's like you are being forced to not be your realized self. It's just like there was a speech, I wish I remember who it was, but it was a both fan conversation where it was two people on both sides of the spectrum, where it was a parent of a child who the parent allowed the child to do HRT, hormone replacement therapy, at a young age. And then it was hilarious, even though this person didn't out themselves, this man was very effeminate, and was just completely against not only, children getting HRT, but children even exploring, gender identities without even going through HRT. So like clothes and mannerisms and name and things like that. And I was just like, my husband and I were both just like, were you hurt? Who hurt you? That was like the first thing that I said, because everything that this person just said, you just felt this like, not only personal angst, but everything that just came out of their mouth and body was just spewing anger. And I've always wondered, for people who sit on that side, is it because you were forced to fit in this particular box? And the two, and like, and I always keep saying, I hope I'm making sense of what I'm saying, because I've gotten into this habit of, after teaching traditional undergrads this year, I'll say something and then they just like stare at me and say nothing. And I'm like, I was like, where are we? Did I just say something that made no sense? So that's why I'm always saying that now. So how intersectionality shows up in my work now is I'm exploring like ageism and gender roles, and also the role, like people's roles who are supposed to deliver a lot, but in the confines of what somebody else needs. Like, for example, with children, what gets to me is like children always have to either be in the image of something that their parents wanted for themselves, or something that the parents want. Like for example, I was watching early, yes, I'm one of those people. And just like that, a new episode came out today for the season 2, and I was watching it. And there was this scene, and I was just like, I want to know who wrote this scene, because if I wrote this is not authentic. Where you have a Black male character, very upper class, who was trying to get a taxi, and his child was there too. They're Black, and the taxis were just passing him. And then one taxi came up, didn't unlock the doors, and the guy challenged the taxi driver and was just like, "You know this is illegal." His mother, who is older, she was probably like maybe 70s or so, but very polished, pristine. You got the sense that she was also like a part of a high class sorority and all this stuff based on what she was wearing. She later in that episode was just like, "How dare you make us look bad? How dare you challenge the man?" And I was like, wait, you would have grown up and existed and gone to college and all these things around the civil rights movement. So you would have been one of those people that would have challenged. And so she was just like, how dare you make people question our image? And it's always, I've noticed with people, it's always, how dare you make us look bad? And that's something that I'm really exploring in my work right now, is exploring spaces. And what's interesting, as a caregiver, I'm kind of in that space where I'm not given a choice on, when to care for people and who to care for people. But as a child, I had a lot of choices depending on who I was with. So in terms of intersectionality, and kind of hopefully tying a little bow, adding to what Naya said, was looking at intersectionality from the perspective of people who not only don't have a voice, but they're made to be given a voice based off of what box they would fit, based off of whose needs that they're trying to meet at that particular time.
I love all of that. And I want to talk to you so much more about adolescent development theory and models, because that's part of what I did my grad school work on. But anyway, that's different topic. We can connect later afterwards. But and also, Naya, can you put the name of the individual in the chat who you didn't quote? And because I want to explore more of their work. I haven't heard of them before. So in my own work more recently, when we talk about intersectionality, I have been exploring my own identity so I've also been in my writing and in my other work, looking at the kind of concept of parent and how that extends to not just like the birth parent roles. So I myself am what I call a bonus parent, and navigate like sometimes very complicated, nuanced, complex, like co-parenting dynamics. And so I explore that, just my own experience in my work and how I relate to these children who, they, like, nobody asks to be in like their parents' life, right? Like that's not a choice we get to make, but also kind of like we entered each other's lives later, you know, and so exploring that, and then also generational trauma. My family lost through othering, I would say. So like family systems, parenting, and all that gets wrapped into that through being othered. So whether that's being, acknowledged or not acknowledged, or that kind of like almost queering of the parent model, right? And also, so I, just as like a little bit of backstory, so I grew up an only child, but in part that was because I was estranged from some of my family. And so I'm kind of coming to terms with that, and also exploring kind of the generational trauma that occurred generations back in that side of the family that caused loss of language, loss of cultural identity, through kind of like this, genocide, forced assimilation, but then that has impacts on the way that parents parent and children grow up and operate. And then also, just like, I've been sort of looking at how I am coming to terms with that, especially as I've reunited with some family, and we are like exploring that together. So that all shows up in my work, like in whether it's my writing or my collaborations with other artists, and trying to facilitate space and create spaces where, people can be their whole selves, and the understanding that you are not just one piece of your identity, and shouldn't have to be, while still, I'm trying to stay on topic, but while still finding the community that you need in that moment. If that makes sense.
I encourage going off topic as much as you all want.
I'm also neurospicy, so that just happens.
Yeah, please drift off topic, because really, honestly, the conversations that you all are having amongst yourselves, it has been so fascinating to be a witness to. You're all such dynamic individuals, and I really do thank you. So please go off topic. With that, I'll introduce a new topic. Well, one of the things that I'm really interested in, and given that it is Pride Month, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Pride serves as a platform to raise awareness and to celebrate diversity. Pride has become more mainstream in the last 40 years, and with the mainstreaming of Pride, we also see, the commercialization of Pride, the productization of Pride. I'd love to kind of hear your all thoughts on where Pride stands as an activity for the LGBT community, and please throw it out to the crowd.
Oh, it's like, boom, another weight drop. Boom, another weight. It's so hard for me. Like, for example, you have, okay, I'm about to reveal so much about myself. Bath and Body Works, Torrid, and there's one other really big mainstream, like, consumer product where they say that proceeds from particular sales go to LGBTQIA plus related organizations and do particular work, but they don't say how much go to those places and all those things. So for me, it's ironic that, at least what I'll say with Bath and Body Works and Torrid, and these are places that I've shopped at for a very long time. Torrid, for folks, is like very quirky plus size clothing. The places that I've been to, like the brick and mortar locations of those two particular products, have queer staff working for them. It's just very clear. Like every time I go, the same people are working, and they talk about, you know, like there was one person I remember at Bath and Body Works, they have the Love Always Wins line that came out for Pride Month. And he was just like, oh, I'm so glad that this is out, that they get to celebrate me, blah, 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 blah. So they're like open about their identities within their workplace. The two of them, those two places, I feel like are trying, but I still am just like, oh, why this performative? Where, like, I would love to be able to talk with their staff and be like, so how much are you as a queer identifying person protected in the workplace? Like, are you getting a fair wage? Can you be fired because of particular markers, blah, 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 blah. But it's just like, okay, but these two places are doing something with regards to taking some, I don't know how, probably like 1%, who knows, and contributing to, I remember like one time it was like the Trevor Foundation and some of these other places. Now you have Target. Target is frustrating for me because it's a place, and I think this is what makes Bath and Body Works and Torrid a little different. Target gets everybody's money. I don't care how much you fight it, somebody in your household shops at Target. Unlike, as I'm looking at my stepdaughter in the background, unlike Bath and Body Works and Torrid, those are very specialized places. Not everyone is going to shop at those places unless you're, you know, plus size who likes to wear very quirky things that you can't really wear to work, or you like to smell like fruit and groceries. Whereas with Target, you just start selling groceries. I'm telling you, if you've never been to Bath and Body Works, go, and you'll see like stuff scented in strawberries and like I'm telling you, like cardamom, you will walk out smelling like a grocery store. So with Target, that's a harder one for me, because no one can avoid shopping at Target because it's like a grocery store. It sells everything that you need. And I remember when they had, and this isn't the first time that they've had Pride particular merchandise. And, you know, I don't know what locations took them out from the front of the stores, because here in Connecticut, at least the two that I've been to, the Pride like merchandise is still front and center in the store. But in other locations, I've read and heard that people complain and moved it to the back of the store. Target can't afford to be challenged or lose dollars because, and this is me putting my management cap on, even though I could be wrong, even though the smaller places, Bath and Body Works and Torrid, are so specialized, with Target, because it's so mainstream, they could be losing dollars from the far right. And that can be very dangerous. And so for Target, everything that they're going to do is be very performative, and it's not going to be authentic, because the minute that they're challenged, they're going to be like, oh, we have to pull back. We have to pull back because we can't lose our bottom line. So for me, I'm like, Target, you can't, like, I don't know, like, it's hard for me because I'm like, Target, you can't really be front and center like this. But I know people who have worked at Target and who are of protected classes and are queer identified and who can be safe being open and honest and authentic about themselves. So that's great. But I'm like, but I feel like you can still keep that under wraps, because those people can work at targets that are in safe zones, like Western Mass, Northern Connecticut. So it's really hard for me because I feel like in order for like legislation to pass, in order for us to not be somebody's threat, it has to be Pride, has to be mainstream, but at the same time, is it an authentic presentation and support of Pride? I probably made no sense. I probably rambled, but it's a hard one for me because I know I know commercialization can never be truly dedicated to the cause, but at the same time, somebody mainstream has to put it out there so that certain facets can be more respected. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what other people think about that, because that is a great question.
I saw you on mute too.
I was, but I don't have to be.
I just wanted to say quick that I totally agree with you. I think that there's this double-edged sword with commercialization, which is, it feels to me, or can be a form of like almost further marginalizing communities when it becomes an opportunity for people to say, well, this is all I have to do. And see, I did this over here. I'm doing this. I put a rainbow on something. Like that's right. Like it's like the shrinking and pinking thing, but like with with like June suddenly. And then I'm gonna take my pride flag down July 1st and replace it with like, the US flag. Anyway, but like at the same time, I am torn because visibility is needed and important. Like I have this watch band that I made from a promotional giveaway from a Pride event that like literally had a logo of something on it that I cut off and I turned into a watch band because I was like, oh, that's stretchy and will like work perfectly for, and then I wore that on a plane and the person sitting next to me who looked to be in their late teens, early 20s, turned to me and like very nervously said, I noticed your watch band, and like it, and started like talking to me and expressing just like appreciation of that visibility. And so like there are benefits, right? It's not all like, with Target or with mainstream sort of like this these companies or organizations where it's like, I see what you're doing there, right? But there can be small ripple effects, and I think that on an individual level, we can kind of help to guide those, and then also, talking outside of Western Mass for a second, like I work with students who come from all over the country and who travel all over the world. And there have been Pride marches, Pride parades, Pride events that more recently have been either canceled or forced into different spaces, or like otherwise kind of there have been attempts to like kind of like push those out and tamp those down across the world in different locations where I work or where I operate. And coming from the background of being a kid who had the opportunity to to be in Pride events where there was this like element and this feeling of danger at the same time as you were like, there was a risk involved, even with the community. I hadn't felt that for a while, and now that's starting to reemerge in some of the events that I'm going to, or throughout like the attempts at visibility, right? And it's tough. Like I for Trans Day of Visibility, I posted something on my TikTok where I have a project that I'm doing where I ask AI to create crochet patterns for me, and then I sort of consider it a collaboration when then I turn those into a physical item, and I kind of explore the like complexities of that, how right. And this is the one that I was talking about. So I made a seahorse, and I created this video for Trans Day of Visibility, and that is the seahorse that Jason is holding up. And even then, part of me, even like a member of like the greater trans community, I felt conflicted about putting that up. Like, why am I doing that specifically on Trans Day of Visibility? There was a lot of like questioning and like really digging into like, is this the way that I want to present this? Initially I was going to use an audio in the background that was maybe like catchier, a little bit more popular, something that people would like immediately recognize and engage with. But that creator, that artist, has not so far identified as in the queer community. And instead I asked myself, like, why not choose a song and music that I enjoy, that comes from a queer creator, that can, potentially maybe share this creator's work a little bit more. And so, I did go with that, but it's, there's a lot of complexity there, and it's hard to talk about in a general sense when so many different cultures and communities need different things in visibility and in Pride.
And there was a question from the audience. I would love to hear Naya weigh in on this, but they were asking for some clarification about when you said, what does it mean that Target thought it was safe, Nicole, before Naya weighs in?
Yeah. I'm just going to speak from what I read. So the past couple of years, and I shop at Target a lot, they always have Pride merchandise. It's always at the front of the store. I can't remember what parts of the country this happened, because I know it didn't happen here, where, and I hope I'm answering the question, where people pushed back and was like, Target, how dare, kind of like what they did with the gender toys years ago. How dare you have these things? Target, why are you getting political? Blah, 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 blah. And some Targets moved the material to the back of the store. In terms, I can't remember when I said Target was safe, but I know that Target is a place where, because they're so mainstream and because they have to cater to so many, like they sell toilet paper, they sell, unlike, Torrid that sells plus size clothing, and Bath and Body Works, again, that sells things that smell good, that smell like your grocery store. Target sells toilet paper, and some places grocery items. They also take EBT. They are in, like, it's kind of like Dunkin'. Their Targets are everywhere. And so Target has to, because of what they sell and because of their mission, they have to be welcoming to everyone. I think that's probably where I was going with that. And so, oh, Q&A, looking here. Oh, okay. Okay, so I hope people don't mind me reading this, but it says, sorry, I wasn't looking for clarification. It was my assumption that they must have felt like it was safe. They would not have taken the initial financial risk if they did. So I do wonder if, because one of the things that I've noticed that's happened is since He Who Shall Not Be Named was in that role for 4 years, our political climate has shifted, because there was a time where I feel like people could be like, I had friends who were on the other side of the fence, but I didn't feel like my life could be unsafe or jeopardized. Whereas since He Who Shall Not Be Named was that role for 4 years, now people who are of a particular identity or of a particular political stance could be hurt and harmed. So I wonder if now that the like extreme right now has more clout and more fuel because of that, that might be why Target may have pulled back. But also, this is the first time I've ever heard Target being threatened around Pride. Because since I can't even remember how long, every like Target is so, we need to make money. Like they take every single month and brand something. Like Black History Month, they brand clothes and bags and makeup. And then like Hispanic Heritage Month, they do the same thing. Native American, they do the, like they capitalize on opportunities, and they've done it for such a long time. But I think this is the first time where they've had at least they've had pushback and have responded to the pushback. Oh, and there was something that I wanted to mention around Pride and Visibility quickly. The theater world, ironically, because that's my home space, theater ironically is catching up. So I don't know if people heard, but the recent Tony Awards, there were 2 non-binary folk who won major acting awards, and it was huge for me. And and both I believe are very femme presenting. What is more challenging for me, and it made me go, okay, can we get to a place at least with the EGOT, so like the Emmys, Grammys, Oscars, and Tonys instead? Because I know with like the Pulitzers, the Peabodys, and all of that, they kind of wrap people not based on gender, but based on the talent. Can we do best featured performer, best main performer? To be honest, I think that will be more interesting, because now, at least with the Oscars, when it comes to best featured actress, now it feels like they're just picking people. Because I'm like, once you get past 2 or 3 people, I'm like, how were you nominated? You barely like remembered your lines. So I feel like if they were to ungender the awards, I think it would be more interesting, because it would really force us to really look at the performance. But the Tonys, like seeing the 2 folks who won in their particular categories, which I thought was interesting, that they were put in the best male actor categories, because the 2 folk are very femme presenting. But that's a whole other conversation. Just the fact that they like that the people, when they got their awards and all those things, they are like, we are very gender non-conforming, but we're very at the award ceremony presented very femme. So I'm hoping that from the Tony Awards that it is a beginning. Yes, there have been like the Emmys that have awarded like Michaela J. Rodriguez, who is a trans woman. She won in the best like I think supporting actress category. Yay. But can we take it even one step further of like degendering those categories? So that's like another step in the direction of visibility.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Let's do it. I mean, in fact, taking that a step further, and I have no idea what this will spark, but I would love to get to a place where everybody, every human, every person could be so comfortable being in touch with the part of themselves that in this current moment we would call queer or trans or neurodiverse or neurospicy or whatever, such that those terms would no longer be useful. You know what I'm saying? Like right now they're useful for us to find community. They're useful for us to sort of understand ourselves. They're useful for, you know, for a lot of different reasons. They're also not useful in other ways. But if everybody had just, it was sort of normalized that everybody had access to those within themselves, like whatever. Yeah, of course, you know, the different ways in which humans can be, you know, even the concept of polyamory, right? I mean, I'm not saying everybody should be polyamorous. What I'm saying is being in touch with the part of yourself that would be able to, if you allowed yourself, to understand how you can love more than one person at the same time in an intimate way. Because I guarantee you probably already do. It, you know, but it's I'm just, you know, anyhow, and where was I going with all that? Who knows? Doesn't matter. And this idea of, you know, what does pride doing for us? I actually kind of want to shift and expand that out to the concept of representation and visibility in general, right? You know, there is a bittersweetness, a pain, almost, you know, this painful whatever that comes up for me when I'm watching a show, right? And you're going on the show, and then all of a sudden there's a character and you're like, well, I am like, you know, it's a very obviously queer, obviously non-binary, obviously whatever, trans kind of character. And you're like, ooh, you know, and that's lovely. And also, why is that so unusual? Why is it that I'm having this like big, huge reaction? It's because I don't hardly ever see it, you know, you know, and when you do see it, it's packaged. So, you know, such that, you know, it's going to happen because, you know, this is that kind of show. Right. And in fact, today is Octavia Butler's birthday. And I'm reminded of, yes, it is. It might be her 75th. In fact, I'm not sure. I know. I've always felt a connection to, I mean, a lot of us do, but I remember hearing about when she died and how she died. She fell, hit her head on the concrete, and that was just so impactful for me as a child, like when I was younger, and I'm just throwing that out there for no particular reason. It's just a sharing. But the quote that came up for me just now, I believe it was an interview that she was doing, and so she was talking about, you know, Black characters in literature and why, you know, the ways in which they're used, I guess you could say. So she was basically saying that the norm is to have white characters. So in other words, you don't say that they're white characters, just in other words, a character is going to be white. That's just the norm, and that's the expectation, at least in the view of those who would see it that way, I believe is how she put that. And then, but to introduce a Black character is to introduce an abnormality. And I believe she was saying, going even farther, is to say the purpose was to tell a story about racism, or at the very least about race, slavery, right? Like these sort of tropes, you know, and maybe they've expanded a little bit, but frankly, they're really all the same. You know, it all comes down to the same sort of themes. Like, let's talk about, you know, how we're all oppressed, and how, let's talk about what it looks like to be different. And let's sort of play this role of, how do I want to say, being gazed at, you know, and seen in this way of the other, what's the word I'm looking for here? I want to say unique, but that's not the word I'm looking for. In any event, and so what I'm saying is, yes, it's good to see folks that I can relate to, whatever identities that I'm connecting to this human being. And A, there should be more of it. And B, you know, creators really need to interrogate and, you know, themselves about why they're doing it. You know, are you doing this just because you want to check a box, you know, internally or externally, and do it? You know, like, it's kind of like the pride thing you were talking about. Like, is this just a thing that is supposed to be done these days, right? You know, like, or are you doing it because you also can see yourself in the experience of someone else who doesn't look anything like you, who doesn't supposedly is nothing like you, and yet you can get to that core of seeing anyone as being another human being. And I'm not saying this in the context of that that classic, you know, we're all the same color kind of concept. Obviously, that's not what I mean, because that is just not useful. Thank you, Western Massachusetts. I hear it all the time. Anyway, no, I'm saying, but what I am saying is that the ways in which we are othered are the ways in which we're dehumanized, right? Like, by definition, if I am seen as, you know, so different that you don't think that I am deserving of the same respect that your family members or your whatever are deserving of respect, that by definition, that means that you see me as less than in terms of my humanity. And so what I'm saying is, if you're a creator, if you're someone who has influence over what's going to be on TV, what's going to be on shelves at the bookstore, you know, then find ways to turn that on its head. Find ways to really tell stories about human beings, not stories about diverse individuals, but stories about humans. You know, humans who every single one of us has a different experience, and every single one of us, if we are allowed, can tell you how rich those experiences are, you know, and go from there, you know.
Just really quick, did you ever watch the Caprica series, the Battlestar Galactica spinoff?
Oh, no, I haven't.
It's worth a watch because queerness and polyamory in particular were represented on that show, but not as a plot point. They were just ways of being that particular characters were enacting, and it when I saw it for the first time on that show, I was kind of fascinated by this idea because I kept waiting as an audience member to see it become a plot point, because we're so conditioned as audience members to see that, to see like, okay, where's the queer storyline in which like this gangster and his husband are explained, and it never was. And I remember being so kind of flabbergasted, like in the mid 2000s, by like not in a bad way, but in like a writer way, being like, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. And like I was hooked from that point forward. But we have about 10 minutes left, and I would love to hear more about representation, but I do want to open up this space right now for you all to talk about your projects, anything that you have coming up that you want to talk about, anything that you really want people to know about, to make sure that we have that space and time, and then if we have time left, we can get right back to this. Oh yeah, The Expanse. Yeah, I love The Expanse.
Before I offer up what things I'm working on, I definitely want to point people. I can't remember the name of the episode or what season, but an episode of Everybody Hates Chris, which was about Chris Rock's childhood in the 80s in Brooklyn. It came out in the early 2000s. There was a femme-ish, gender non-binary character in one of the episodes, and I think Chris was in either late middle school or early high school. And what was interesting, how that character navigated within the episode, and also how that character was trying to dog check everything that Chris was doing. So the way in which that character operated, it was, as you know, Naya, as you were talking, I was like, oh, it wasn't like this hyper, I need to check a box. It was, I'm right. It felt like they were writing this character to be in opposition to Chris to help him kind of. So check out that episode. It's very interesting. But other than dissertating, I should be hopefully finishing my dissertation in August. The biggest things for me right now are Black Writers Read this summer. We're doing a virtual book club discussions where each month we are doing a book club discussion with a past guest. So you don't have to sign up for all 4. You can sign up for 1 or more. This month on Sunday is with Enzo Salon Seren, who is the author, I actually have it here on my desk, of American Scapegoat. Nice. Next month, we're doing Natasha Gordon Chippenberry's Finding La Negrita, which is historical fiction set in Costa Rica around the Black Madonna figure. In August, we're doing Tracy Cross's Rootwork, which is horror. And in September, we're doing La Vista Jones's The Boss Shift, which is about changing your mindset around work and busyness. So that's like the biggest things for me right now, as I'm trying to finish my dissertation, is finding spaces where people can congregate and talk about books. And I hope that people sign up for these book clubs, because what's interesting is, in their virtual on Zoom, you will be in the Zoom room with the actual author. So you'll be able to pose questions directly to the author and things like that. And then season 4 of Black Writers Read, the live stream and the podcast, will be picking back up in September. And then from then, once I'm done with my dissertation, hopefully I will get back to massive like creative writing, because I haven't really done it in a long time.
Wow.
Very cool. I'm excited. Go ahead, sign up. So what am I up to? I am being, resting, working, cleaning, and creating. I am actually hoping to, I'm hoping to, how do I say this? So Creative Resilience Project is my baby, and Creative Resilience Lab is an actual physical space here in Holyoke on Race Street. And so it's been a minute since I've held workshops myself personally, just for reasons. And I'm hoping to start some of those up again. So the Creative Resilience dialogues, art-based dialogues about wellness, identity, whatever comes up really. Those are fun and deep, and so I miss them. I miss connecting with people on that level. So stay tuned. You can certainly reach out to me directly if you're curious about that. Want to know more? The space itself is meant to be a community space. Anyone can reach out to me and use it. Other people have done so. We've had other people, use it for workshops, use it for performances. Jared was there when Deanna was here. So, and may in fact be again, you never know. And what else am I doing? Writing grant. I'm, hopefully going to be sending in some grant applications, speaking of grants. And yeah, dreaming, dreaming big. Yeah.
This summer for me has been incredibly busy with my international educator work. So honestly, over the past few weeks and then the rest of the month and into July, I've been so busy with that. But in between spaces, I'm writing and putting together a chapbook that I don't know when that's going to happen, but yeah. And then also my big project, I think, for this year, really, in addition to the other Attack Bear Press projects that I like assist on in the background, is the poetry vending machine project that I do. We have one in Amherst, one in East Hampton, and then I'm bringing 2 to Holyoke, which I have been trying to do for years now. And through shout out to Holyoke Local Cultural Council and Mass Cultural, I did get a grant to expand the project in 2023 and beyond. And so I'm working on creating a Spanish language poetry slot, and also trying to look at potentially other like themed poetry, because I've gotten some feedback from the community that like they might want to see something like queer poetry or local young emerging writers, and so I'm working with a friend and translator and poet on that project and getting that launched by the end of 2023, and finding spaces for that. So I'm excited about that. And then, yeah, I mean, 50 Arrow Gallery has some stuff brewing that maybe can't announce yet, like quite right now, but is going to be like going through some exciting maybe changes in this year, next year. So I would just say keep an eye out on those. And then also my crochet nonsense, generated crochet on TikTok. If you want to go see me act like a complete fool, my silly side comes out, and that collaboration with AI. Oh, I guess I can plug, this is like very far away, but officially some of my work with generated crochet, I can't reach him, Gerald is up there, my original project, but who I brought with me to Japan, is going to be part of a show at Think Tank at the Birmingham Museum in the UK, where they're exploring like coding with like the connections between coding and like craft, fiber crafts in particular, because it's a very like fiber art hub and has a deep history with that, and how we can like relate like what is coding, and exploring like pattern making as coding, and then also obviously AI and the future of coding. So there's that.
Well,
And
I want to
also-
take, oh, sorry, please.
and I wanted to put in a really quick plug. I totally forgot. Black Writers Read, beginning in season 4, we're expanding to include episodes called Writers Across the Margins, to give myself opportunities to talk with other writers of color.
Yay.
And Jason Montgomery, who recently published poetry, will be a guest in October. So I'm super excited. Oh my God. I've wanted an opportunity to talk with Jason about just everything. So I'm going to apologize right now. It's going to be more than just writing. So,
Oh, no, it's okay. I hope we
It's gonna
just
be
sit
all
down
hard.
and like go over everything. I got so much tea I'm holding on to that I'm just going to spill all over the place. So I want to take a moment to thank everyone on the panel. This has been such an amazing conversation. You all are just such dynamic figures in our community. And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come out here and to act as voices for the LGBTQ community. This is Valley Arts Mentors, done in partnership with the Valley Arts Mentors, and I want you to know that for all the young people who are watching us now, this may seem like a very difficult time, and it may seem as though our community is under tremendous assault once again, but the people you're seeing here now are the elders and leaders who have been through it and who are here for you. So once again, the VMA webinar series is supported by an organizational recovery grant and a festivals and projects grant from Mass Cultural Council. The webinar series and the mentorship program began with grants from Mass Humanities and the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts Valley Create program, and with funding from the Barr Foundation. This programming is also supported with grants from the Chicopee, Conway, Hadley, Holyoke, Ludlow, Northampton, Southampton, Springfield, and West Hampton Cultural Councils. So with that, if anyone has a word to go out with, I'd love to hear it.
Abundance!
Yeah, thank you very, very much. That's a perfect word to go out with. Everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining us.